Correct. Here we go. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Kalayim, Pei Gimel, Halachis, Dalid, and Hey. We're learning today Daf Lamed Beis. We're going to begin on Daf Lamed Aleph, Amid Beis, Mamish, the last line of the Amid, At Kedoin Beroit Seif. So we're going to begin today's Daf focusing more on how and when will outer rows of the mukshiyos, unique types of vegetables, the ones that we have been learning about, the kishoyim, the deloyim, the pola mitzri, those three, that we learned that if they are planted in outer rows and inside of it you plant, whether it is our sugya, another one of the mukshiyos, or God willing, on daf lamed beis, amid beis, and halacha hay's case, onions, regardless the details, but the concept, since the mukshiyos have long vines and leaves, even only two from either side, one from the right, one from the left, they close in the inner species, disallowing it to be planted. And if it's planted, it's going to have to be uprooted. So we're going to learn more details of how and when, indeed, can only two outer rows create the chavush issue prohibition for the inner row. That's going to be just the first couple of lines. And then what we will have to do today is that we're going to have to go back to Halachet Dalit. And we're going to ask everyone, if you have the art scroll, to go to page, not now, earlier in the share, soon into the share, to Daf Lamed Amid Beis, 30b1. And as we have in the Mishnah, there are three cases. We're going to review all the three cases. In the Mishnah, explicitly, we have a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim in the third case. And our Gemara will quote a machlokes Amrei Rayim, whether Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim only argue in the third case, or whether perhaps they also argue in the second case. All of that has to do with how are we to understand the Chachamim's oisrin in the third case. We left it when we learned the Mishnah for the Gemara. Today will be the Gemara. We're going to have some unbelievable insights into how to understand the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. And finally, we're going to go to the last part, to the Seifa of Halacha Dalid, that was permitting the technique called angling, like we explained. If you have not seeds, you're not doing an act of zriya. Yes, you're doing an act of netiya. That means you have a sapling. And these vegetables already have some height. And since they have some height, they have already some leaves. Even when you replant them, those leaves will be protruding from the ground. You can plant, says the Mishnah, two different types of vegetables in the same hole, provided that the leaves of vegetable A is going to be angled over the right side of the hole, on top of the hole. The other one that you're planting in the same hole will be angled to the left side, to the southern part of the hole, on top of the hole. And because of the leaves laying in opposite directions, they appear so distinct that there's no problem b'chlal of kalayim, even if in the hole itself you don't have the regular prerequisite, let's say lachachamim, tafach and a half space. There's going to be a braisa that's going to elaborate more about this leniency of angling in the Mishnah. And then what we're going to do today is we're going to relearn, because we learned it already yesterday, halacha hey, just the Mishnah, in which we have the three-way machlokes Tanoim, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva, and the Chachamim. Okay, Atkan, the words of introduction. Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, the last line. And we're learning about this unique capacity of two outer rows of mukshiyos closing in the inner row, making the inner row's plantation forbidden. So At Kedoin, says the Gemara, what would make more sense, what's a given, is if the outer rows are roitzeif. The word roitzeif means that they are planted densely. In other words, let's say in the case of the Mishnah, you have gourds on the right and gourds on the left, right? Or gourds on the right, and you have pola mitzri on the left, whichever ones we're speaking about. And they were packed in the row. We already spoke about the minimum length of the row yesterday. But in the row proper, they're packed one near the other. Question of the Gemara is, what were to happen? What happens if you have the row? The row has the minimum length of the row, and you have a row on the right and a row on the left. And the question is, again, if it's the oisin kolachim yechidim, if the outer rows were planted sparsely, they might look more like individual stalks. As individual stalks, there's no din of chavush when there's only from two sides. Even by the mukshiyos, what will be the din? So the Gemara answers, the Gemara understands, the flamid beis amad aleph on the top, that come on, the temer gama kerem. Just like when it comes to a vineyard, and we began learning already yesterday the dinim of a vineyard, even though really this will be the topic beginning with Perek Daled. We're almost there. Right, the minimum of 2 rows. One row has to have 3, one row has to have 2. And when it comes to a kedem, guys, we learned that the normal distance between each vine itself in the row and the other, the normal spacing is 4 amos. 4 amos is a lot of space. And nevertheless, if you have, right, 3 and 2, and they're spaced the way they're normally spaced, that is a bona fide vineyard. So the rows, as they are needed to be defined, b'negei din kerem, we don't say it's only if it's packed in. We allow for it to be sparse. So so therefore, logically, when it comes to other zerayim, which b'chlal, there's a much more leeway, right? Just beginning with one is asar b'no, one is only asar b'achila, one is only asar to plant, even mutar b'achila. Is afacha when it comes to the din over here of the mukshiyos loishanya who writes who oisek lachim yechidim. In either case, if you have the minimum length and you don't have the minimum space between both of the outer rows, as we learned yesterday, whether it's 8 amas, whether perhaps it's 12 amas, at least in certain circumstances, then you have an issue with chavush, and the inner row has to be uprooted, or the inner row may not be planted because it will be seen as mixed with the outer rows. All right. Now, before we're gonna appreciate the subsequent topic of whether the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is only on the third case, but maybe also on the second case, let's quickly review all of the 3 cases in the Mishnah. So keep your finger here on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, and we're going to Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Go to Daf Lamed if you have an art scroll 30b1, and we're going to quickly read the Mishnah here. So the Mishnah's first case number 1 is Hanoteya Shtei Shurei Shal Kishuyim. As we keep on learning that in our Mishnah, a shura is comprised of 4 amas. 2 shurais means 8 amas. So there is a row that has 8 amas of width. And in it you have kishuyin, a certain type of melon. And right adjacent to it, shtei shurei shel diluyin. Again, 8 amas. And right adjacent to it you have shtei shurei shel pula mitzvah. And let's add that in the bottom of these rows, or in the head of these rows, you have a furrow that's only 6 tfachim wide, only, according to the Rashi's understanding, B'shitas Rabbi Akiva, and the halach is like Rabbi Akiva, 6 tfachim long. You have that in place because we cannot even erase the requirements that we learned in halacha gimel. That has to be there, but you have that. So the din is mutter. And what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? Because since by the mukshiyos, these ones could create chavush, chiddush is, look, according to everyone, no matter how you learn it, since the middle row, which is the diluyin, in the case of the Mishnah, the gourds, you have 2 rows of diluyin planted, which means there is a width of 8 amas, which means that you have 8 amas separating the row of the right and the row to the left. So there's no problem with chavush. That is case number 1. Now case number 2. In contrast, if you only have 1 shuda of kishuyim, right, 4 amas, they have only 1 shuda of diluyin, 4 amas. You have, again, adjacent to it, 1 shuda full amitzi, and it says the Mishnah Asur. We're going to learn Asur because the 2 outer rows, what are the outer rows? 1 kishuyin and 1 full amitzi don't have 8 amas space in between them. So whatever is planted in between them is going to appear to be mixed in with them. chavush, closed in by them, trapped in by them, and therefore appear to be mingled, taroivis, and therefore it's prohibited. Now, the Rabbeinu HaKadosh did not quote any machlokes in the second case. However, what's the third case? So the third case is 4 rows. And Kevin, if you can put up your picture, that will be helpful. You have to leave it up there. You have a shura shal kishuyim. I don't care if you're going from right to left or left to right. You have 1 row, only 4 amas of kishuyim. Adjacent to it is 1 shura of deloyim. Adjacent to it is 1 shura shal pula mitzli. This is like case number 2, but now in addition, you added a 4th row, the shura shal kishuyim, which means in both extreme ends you have kishuyim. Rabbi Eliezer is matir, and the chachamim are oisrim. Now, why would Rabbi Eliezer be matir, and why would the chachamim be oisrim? And as I'll just speak out right now, there's different ways of understanding it, and according to one way, very good. I don't like if you can put Kevan, on the lower box. On the lower box, just put inside a kuf and a dalit and a pay and a kuf, just for the kishoyin, for the deloyin, for the pool, and for the kishoyin, just for people to see what's what. And I want to say like this: one way of understanding Rabbi Yaakov is that we view this type of plantation as defined by the outer rows. The outer rows are of kishuyin, almost like viewing it like it's a field of kishuyin. Now, how much space do you have from the 2 outer kishuyins? You have 8 amas. Even though the 8 amas are not comprised of one type. The 8 amas are comprised both of deluyin and of pula mitzli. Doesn't matter. You can view as the 2 inner rows like 1 row of 8 amas, separating the 2 outer kishuyin with 8 amas, and therefore you're good to go, and therefore he's matir. If that's the logic, so then why would the chachamim maser? Because let me say these words, Keva. Look at it's helpful if you have a picture. We are going to look like chachamim that you have over here 2 different groups. You have, I'm going now from Kevin's picture from right to left. What looks to me from right to left, kishuyin, pula mitzri and deloyin. Just look at that. And if you just look at that, then daflamed base, then you have a problem. What's the problem? Because it's like the second case of the Mishnah. What the problem is with what? The problem is with the pula mitzri. The pula mitzri is chavushed from the kishuyim on the right and from the deloyim on the left. And in between the kishuyim and the deloyim, what do you have? You only have 4 amas. So the pula mitzri is prohibited. And let's go further. Now go further to the left. Look in the deloyim. Let's view the deloyim as it being sandwiched in, closed in by the kishuyim to the left and the pula mitzri to the right. Just look at 3 at a time. So in other words, there's 2 overlapping fields of 3. And if you look at it that way, then in between the 2 outer ones, there's only 4 amas. And that would make a prohibition because both the pula mitzri and the deloyim will be us. This is a simplistic way of looking at the Mishnah. And that will allow us to say that Rabbi Eliezer's heter is taka only on the 3rd case. Because on the 3rd case, since you do have 2 outer rows of kishuyim, we consider that, it's a field of kishuyim. We combine the 2 inner ones, Rabbi Yaakov, we combine leheter. We say, in between the kishuyim, you have pula mitzri and deloyim. So you end up having 8. And that heter does not exist in the 2nd case in the Mishnah. Because in the 2nd case of the Mishnah, you only have 3 rows. Each row is only 4 amas. The middle one is separating the 2 outer ones with only 4 amas. So that's the rule that we're learning, that in order for these mukshiyos types of vegetables not to create chavush, you have to have a minimum of 8 amas space, and you don't have it. So this would be very good. A simple way of explaining how the machlokes in the seifa is dafka in the seifa and not in the middle case. Atkan balpeh. Now let's read it on side. So says Rabbi Anai that the machlokes that not the way we said it. Not the way we said it. Rabbi Anai says that just like Rabbi Taka quoted the Machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim in the third case, similarly, that will be the dispute in the second case as well. Now, why wouldn't Rabbi quote the Machlokes at the first time? That's a good kasha. And that will be Taka why Rav, whose opinion we explained by heart, won't agree with Rabbi Yana. But what does Rabbi Yana say? That be Machlokes. Now, what will be the logic over here? If you can put up the picture, a whole different understanding. Put up the picture. What's my new understanding? That the reason why Rabbi Yaakov is matir, in case number 3 is because no one looks at the case 3, the bottom picture of Kevan, as defined by the outermost rows. No one looks at it that way. Every time you have 3 rows, even if you have 4 rows and 5 rows and 6 rows, just like at 3 rows. So really, the third case of the Mishnah has 3 sets of 3 rows. I'm sorry, 2 sets of 3 rows. Either if you're going from right to left, Kishuyin, Pula Mitzri, Deluyin, or go from the right, Kishuyim, Deluyin, Pula Mitzri. And each one of the 3, look at 3 at a time. Only look at 3 at a time.
But it has to be in that particular order.
That's the order of the Mishnah. And there's a key to that. The key to that is that when you are only looking at 3, you're looking at the middle one. The middle one has to its right Kishuyin and to its left Deluyin.
That's the order it has to be in.
You'll see in a moment. Don't hold that thought. You're going to get clear. Or the middle one is the Deluyin, to the right is Pula Mitzri, and to the left is Kishuyin. What am I trying to say by that? That the whole issue with Rabbi Eliezer, that the middle one becomes closed in from the outer ones, is only if the outer ones are of the same type. So if you have Kishuyin, and something else in the middle, now you got a problem. If you don't have 8 amos, or if you don't have 12 amos. But the moment the 2 outer ones are different, then Rabbi Eliezer holds it's not a problem, because it doesn't look mingled. It doesn't look the same. If that's the logic of Rabbi Yaakov, of Rabbi Eliezer, then he argues in the second case as well. What was the second case of the Mishnah? It was only 3. Kishuyin, Deluyin, Pula Mitzri. Oh, that's what Rabbi Yana is saying. That b'machloikes. That the second case of the Mishnah is also subject to the machloikes, which is Shnei minim mitztarfim lahatzel. Now look inside the 4th case again. Good. Let's go with what we said before by heart. That what? That we look at it as you planted 4. So let's look at all 4 together. If you look at all 4 together, the 2 middle rows. Now, 1 second. There's one more detail, Vlad. That in the 3rd case of the Mishnah, you do have the same on the sides. You do have Kishuyin and Kishuyin. That's not a problem. Why is that not a problem? Because in the middle, you have 4 and 4. Now, the 2 in the middle that are creating a separation, they're not the same type. So we have to say that Rabbi Eliezer, in order for you to come to a leniency, which is you can combine. In order for you not to say that the outer Kishuyin and the outer Kishuyin are closing in, for that, even though the middle ones is Pula Mitzri and Deluyin, we combine them. We do allow combination. We do allow to put together.
Because they're not the same.
Because even though they're not the same, it's in order to go leniently, we can be makel shnei minim and start from lahatzel. But the ein shnei minim and start from laesor. But if you are looking at the outer rows, and by the outer rows, I dafka mean don't look at the outermost rows. I mean just look at the segments of 3, the outer rows. So you have either the Pula Mitzri is the middle, Kshuyin, Deluyin. Look at that.
Right.
The Kshuyin and the Deluyin, the 2 outer ones are not the same. We will not combine it. So even though you don't have 8 amas, because the Pula Mitzri is only 4, everyone only has 4, doesn't matter. Same thing with the other side. The middle one is the Deluyin. To the right, Pula Mitzri. To the left, Kishuyin. We don't say that since there isn't 8 amas in between the Pula Mitzri and the Kishuyin, you got a problem, because they're different types. In other words,
but what about the 2?
So the 2, so everyone is mutter. The 2 in the middle combine enough to make a leniency. The 2 in the middle separate the Kishuyin.
separate that, but between themselves, are they?
We don't have a problem. Okay, so let me just take a step back. Let us pointing out something important. That this entire sugya of the way we are learning halacha dalet is connected to the din of chavush. And if you remove the chavush aspect, like for example, I have a good way to say this, and I thank you. If you have only two rows, doesn't matter how big they are, 4 amas, 8 amas, one of kishuyin and one of deluyin. According to the way we are learning our sugya in the Yerushalmi, lekula alma, as long as you have what we learned in halacha gimel, which is a little furrow of 6 tfachim width and 6 tfachim length. As long as you have that, it's enough for you to be allowed to plant the whole one next to each other. It means if the row, let's say, is 30 amas, they're only separated in one edge for 1 amma, which is 6 tfachim, by 6 tfachim. That's enough to keep them separated. But when it comes to planting vegetables, 6 by 6 tfachim is enough.
Okay, so,
the problem
so
of
kind of like building on 3.
Everything is building on 3. Everything we're learning is very good. The whole issue of our mission is only because 3 chavush. So the machloik is the way Rabbi Yana is learning between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim really has to do with the 2 outer rows have to be of the same type. And Rabbi Eliezer that says no will therefore also argue in the second case of the Mishnah. Second case of the Mishnah was 4 amas of one, 4 amas of another, 4 amas of yet another. According to Rabbi Yanai, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's going to be mutter. As long as you have the 6 by 6 tfach. However, Rav Amar, I disagree with Rabbi Yanai. They only argue in the third case. The second ruling in the Mishnah that says it's mutter, divrei hakoli. In other words, this is important, Vlad. In other words, just like in the fourth case of the Mishnah, you're combining the 2 middle rows to separate the 2 outermost kishuyim rows. Okay, well, if you can combine them, then if you only have 3 rows, or when you're looking at it only has 3 rows, 2 outer rows, even if they are 2 different minim, we combine them. They create chavush. But then the problem will be, so why is Rabbi Eliezer lenient in the third case? In other words, if we're saying that 2 outer rows don't have to be of the same type, in case number 3, look inside the picture, whoever sees the zoom, Kevin's picture, why are we viewing it only as kishuim? If you look at it that way, you're right. Then the 2 middle ones combine to separate. But there is kishuyin and deluyin and pula mitzri in the middle. Why isn't that pula mitzri also? On one side it has kishuyin, on the other side it has deluyin, and it's not 8 amas. Same thing, the deluyim should be prohibited because on one side there is pula mitzri, one side kishuyin. And for that, the answer is like this. Rabbi Eliezer holds that you cannot have a row viewed both as the outer row and as the inner row. For you to make it usher, what are you doing? You're saying, the pula mitzri is usher. Why? Because it's in middle of kishuyin and deluyin. Okay, hold on. Now, if the pula mitzri is called the middle one, then you're telling me, and the deloyim is asur because the pula mitzri is the outer. That you can't do. That's why Rabbi Eliezer is matir. You can't say that which prohibits is that which becomes prohibited. Has better. That which prohibits cannot become that which is prohibited. Either you're the outer or you're the inner. Many people in Yiddishkeit, they like being in, but they don't want to feel like they're in like everyone else. They want to feel like when they're in, they're out. Either you're in or you're out. Oh, beautiful. Okay, that was a Gavaldic piece of Gemara. I just want people should appreciate that in the Bavli, this types of thinking we have, but it would take up many, many more words. Look how brief it is over here. All of this has to be spoken out balpeh. So now we have a machlokes. Now the Gemara is going to have a kasha b'shitas Rabbi Yanai. And Rabbi Yanai holds that the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is even in the second case. So asks the Gemara, I got a problem. That our mission, Masnisin, is unser mission. L'cha'oira pliga al Rabbi Yanai doesn't sound like it's agreeing with Rabbi Yanai, because we learned in our Mishnah concerning the third case, Kevin, I like the little things that you made on the bottom. They're very helpful, just to show that there's a furrow, and there's a furrow, by the way, in the picture in the bottom also. Rabbi Eliezer is matir. In other words, what the Gemara is trying to say, Vlad, is the fact when you have three cases, according to Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Eliezer already argues in the second case. You should have quoted him right away. And if you would not have quoted him on the third case, then I could say, yeah, he argues on the second case from the same svara. He argues on the third case. That's easier. But to say that Rabbeinu HaKadosh only wrote him on the third case as an argument, and for you to go back, I'm learning pshat in a way that therefore he argues in the second case, then maybe should have written in the second case. The Gemara is not answering that. The Gemara is pointing out, really, it's like, why doesn't Rav say like Rabbi Yanai? That's the way the Yerushalmi words it. And the same thing in reverse. And right there, Rav. And then there you get the other way around. Rabbi Yanai will give you an answer. Rabbi Yanai will say, we're going to go like Rav, I got a problem. What's the problem? Shura shall kshuyin, right? Shura shall deluyin, shura shall polamitzi, shall kshuyin. And what did we say? Rabbi Eliezer allows it. And how did Rav learn, Vlad? How did Rav learn that Rabbi Eliezer allows it? So let me use my words again. Because since you have, at the end of the day, you have four rows, that which prohibits cannot become that which, no. That which prohibits cannot be that which becomes prohibited. In other words, either it's the middle or it's the outer. You can't have a row viewed on 1 second. When you're planting it, no one plants four rows at the same second. So the kasha will be, if that's the logic, no, if he agrees, if Rabbi Eliezer agrees that the two outer rows don't have to be of the same type, are you planting it from right to left or left to right? Let's go. Let's say you planted it from left to right. Before you, well, the Gemara doesn't give that answer, but before you come there, you're already going to answer, just when you got the kasha. So you're planting four rows. To get to four rows, you plant three rows. To get to four rows, you plant one, you plant two, you plant three. At that point, according to Rav's understanding, Bishitas, Rabbi Eliezer, the middle one is prohibited. It's already prohibited. So how can it be matter all of them? I get that the deluyin, which is the outer, the one that prohibited the middle one, cannot later. Let's go with that. If it's the one prohibiting, it cannot become prohibited. Okay. But at least one of them should be awesome. That's the kasha we have. That's a logical kasha now. Says the Gemara, how can Rabbi Eliezer be matter on all of them? What's bishloime, the way Rabbi Yanai understands? I have the answer. What's the answer? The answer is that since the two outermost ones are kishuyin, we look at it as a field of kishuyin. And the two inner ones combine not to become chavushed with the outer. That works. But that's not the way you're learning. You're learning and saying, no, we don't do that. So Abazoi, Abdullah not is prior to you planting, whether you went from right to left right, either prior to you planting the last kishuyin, the second kishuyin row, loik fan nesru, one of the two middle rows will become us. That's
what if you plant them at the same time?
So the Gemara, so you said that. I would say Vlad is saying maybe kavana. I'm not, 1 second, hold on. The Gemara is, let me tell you what the Gemara answers. Gemara is being brief. It doesn't mean that what you're saying is not Mustam, it's written down. Everything makes sense. The Gemara is saying like this, that this is a good yisoid in planting. When we plant seeds in the ground, there is a minimum amount of time that is needed for the seed to germinate, whether it's 3 days, whether it is 2 weeks, whatever. We're going to learn many shiurim from many different halachas. Prior to the seeds decomposing, we view, I want to use the word kavana. I think it's more connected on. This guy is planting, you're planting a field. My kavana is to plant a field with however you want to plant it. If when you end the last seeds, the first seeds did not even begin to germinate, it's called you planted it out. You planted that at one time. It doesn't count when you put it in the ground. Oh, so that's the Gemara's answer. So tiftar, that the Gemara says, shenata arbatam, you planted them together. And I want to, the emphasis, the planting them together doesn't mean begashmi as you planted it together. It means exactly the way we explained it. That there's a season of planting. You planted them during the season of planting. You had a mind to plant all the 4 rows. And like we said, that's the key. That since none of them began to germinate. It
says same day.
That's what it means.
That's the same concept, not at once, but same time.
Very good. Okay. And now, before we go on to the new Mishnah, which we already learned yesterday, so today we'll have an opportunity to review it. Now we're focusing on the Seifa of Halacha Dalit, which is again on Daf Lamed Amid Beis, and the Seifa was a whole new din. And the chiddush of the Seifa is that even if you are planting these mukshiyos types of vegetables, even if you're, of course, if you're planting onions or carrots, even there, the way we are learning the Mishnah, if you're not planting seeds, you're planting already a sapling. Sapling already has some height. Even if, again, if you plant them on the floor, avada, even if you put them in a hole, means they're both trapped in a little hole. Doesn't matter how little the hole is, as long as when you put it in the hole, there's already enough of a height of the plant that it has to be angled over, leaned over, and you are choosing to angle one to the right and the other to the left. That creates enough of a separation for it not to be viewed, maras ayin is the ikir, as mingled, and it's mutter. That's what the Mishnah said. Now I have a question then. It's a new thing now. Is it only the case of the Mishnah, one to the right, one to the left, which means they went to opposite sides? North and south is opposite. East and west is opposite. What were to happen if you want to put four? And each one in another of the four directions, that's already a bigger chiddush, because here they're not opposites, but still very much like Rosh Toir. It's in a different direction. And that will be the chiddush that we have in the Brayso. So no, the case of the Mishnah was only two. And if you only have the Mishnah, you might have thought it's only if you have two. Says the Gemara, I want you to know I found the Brayso, Tane. That mutter who adam lasis b'toich sodeyu, that you can make in your field a gumaktana, and it's the patefach. You can actually put into the hole four different vegetables, as long as the angling that's a big chiddush, like we mentioned. Okay, in other words, there's two chiddushim. Number one is, I want to make it clear. Many of the Noise Kalim say that Vlad, if you don't have a hole, avada, it's allowed. Saying what they're saying. Chiddush is, even though you put it in a hole, and the hole is combining them, and the hole is of a tefach, it's significant. And before, when we learned in the Mishnah, remember, you can plant three types: one in the hole, one on the right, one on the left. In the hole, you can only plant one. In other words, because here the chiddush is, no, you can plant more than one. The Brayso says you can plant four. Now we got a problem. The problem is, why not 8?
16.
No, you have to see pictures here. So 1 second. Says the Gemara,
Rabbi, sorry, why not an infinite number? They're all pointing in a different direction.
Very good. We're going to clarify that. So Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, and or in the name of Shimon Bar Nachshoya, in the name of Shimon Lakish. I'm not exactly clear as when do we learn Pshat Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana B'Shem, and the Yerushalmi skips the B'Shem because the next time it says B'Shem, or whether it's two different Amoraim. I don't know how to know that yet, but God willing, we'll figure that out. So we have them, they are saying the following, that when are we allowed then to plant 4? And really, they're saying on the Mishnah, when can we plant 2? Angling out is only what is happening outside the hole. That's the kasha. That's only benoit and l'chur b'shanuf. Outside the hole, there's nothing else planted. Because if you have right outside the hole, it sounds simple, it's not so simple. If you have other species there, you have a lot. So when you point it out of the hole, it will be mingled with that which is outside the hole. That is not allowed. It sounds simple, but it's not so simple. Right? It sounds good.
Hold on. Is it 8 different species?
So far we said 4.
It's still 4 species.
4.
But 8 directions.
No, 4 directions. I forget about what I said. So now, and now they're saying, oh, you know when you're allowed to do it? If there's nothing planted outside the hole. The Gemara, why? It makes sense. Says the Gemara, no, I disagree with you. If there is nothing outside the hole, that if there's nothing outside the hole, even why are you limiting it to 4? You can put 8. Why shmoina? Can you please put the picture, Kevin, of the art scroll here on the Zoom? Now, why don't you have 16? I don't know. But just take a look at the picture. It's very simple. If you look at the picture, let me say it like this. You have 4 directions. And then on every corner, put another one. Now, Kevin asked, why not 16? I don't think that there is a limit. There is a limit where if the change of direction between one and the other is so minimum, no, not that picture, is so minimum, then it doesn't look marasayin that it's separated. But you should be able to put 8. Shnai mikan, shnai mikan, shnai mikan, shnai mikan. I don't know why you don't put the picture of the art school. It's a good picture. I'm not minimizing your art. Kevin, you're amazing, but the art school did actually.
Oh, just tell me what page. I'm sorry, what page?
It's okay. On page 32A2.
I'm
so
going back and forth.
I'll put both pictures right away. The answer is that we're speaking about a hole. Outside the hole, on all 4 directions, you have different plants. Take a look at the bottom picture. The hole is the middle box. The other 4 that are around it is above the hole, and every side there's another type. There's one to the left. And what happens? You are going in the hole. You're planting 4 types, says the Braisa. Only 4. But you know why? Because the 4 that are around, let's say they are planted in conjunction with the directions north, south, east, and west. And the 4 that you are angling over the hole are going in the corner. And indeed, if the case of the Mishnah and of the Braisa would be speaking about benoit and lechurva, then the din is you would be allowed to plant 8. Okay, Atkan, and now let's quickly go over. I know we're reviewing it, but Baruch Hashem, reviewing is even better than learning the first time. And unlike Halacha Dalit that introduced the din of Muksha, now we are learning a regular vegetable field. Just as an example, we're going to be speaking about onions. Guys, don't forget halacha gimel, which is if I'm planting onions and I want to plant another vegetable in a field of onions, I can plant a row as long as in the beginning of the row I leave a furrow of 6 tfach on my 6 tfach. That's all I need. Kshitas Rabbi. Problem here is that our Mishnah now is mixing halacha daled and halacha gimel. It's not all the plants are muksha, but one of the 3, the example the Mishnah will give will be gourds, but it can be the other ones. The deluyan, that's the example of the Mishnah. You have an onion field. You want to plant in the onion field, you want to plant a row or 2, however much you could, of gourds. We already said that if you're going to end up with gourds on one side and gourds on the other side, whatever is planted in the middle becomes chavush. What space do you need to have? Now we already know from yesterday, we say 8, I know, but really here there's a machlekes, 8 or 12. Right. 8 or 12. Compounded with another machlekes, that in halachic gimel, when we spoke about stam vegetables that have to have the separation, I know that the width is only 6 tfachim, but the length, when we say only 6, that's Rabbi Akiva. The way the Rash understands Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel holds that the 6 tfachim has to go all the way across. It happens to be that in our Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel will hold all the way, but the width will be more than 6 tfachim, will be double, will be 2 amas. And that will be the first sheet of the Mishnah. And now let's read it inside. Says the Mishnah. We're speaking about an onion field. You want to put in it as many as you could. Shurais of the luyan. And guys, the luyan, again, bitzalim is lavdafka. Bitzalim means non-muksha vegetables. The luyan lavdafka because it could be either shuyin or polamitzli. But it doesn't matter. In other words, you're planting in it the deloim, and we're going with the problem that we got familiarized with of chavush. 3 opinions. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Oiker shtei shurais, v'netei shura achas, umaniach kamas b'tzalim amakim shtei shurais," and do that again. Oiker shtei shurais, v'netei shura achas, etc., etc. Look inside the picture all the way to the left and the bottom. If you can make it bigger, kevan. In other words, there are 2 things that Rabbi Shmuel accomplished. Number 1, look. How, guys, we're not looking for how much space is there between the onions and the onions. I don't care about that. We're looking as to how much space is there between the gourds and the gourds. Rabbi Shmuel holds that you have to have 12 amas. Yeah, of course it has 12. But how did you get to the 12? You see the number 12 on the bottom? Because in between the onions and the onions, if you're going from left to right, you uprooted only 8. Now, don't forget, Rabbi Yishmael, the gap between the gourds and the onions, the gap cannot be the way Rabbi Akiva says, just a furrow. It has to be mefulash. So what you do is that you plant in the middle gap of 8, you plant the gourds in middle of it. You have 8 amas now vacuumed. You vacuumed out the onions. There's no onions. In middle of the 8, you plant the gourds, allowing on each side of the gourds for there to be 2 amas of a gap. You have the mafulish. And what you accomplish now is you look at this picture, if you look between the onions to the right and the onions in the middle, or the onions in the left and the onions in the middle, I'm sorry, I take that back. If you look in between the gourds of the right and the gourds of the left, that's the ikr. You have 12 amas, and you have to have 12 amas. And as we learned yesterday, Machlekes Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan, whether this sheet of 12 amas will apply in halacha daled. There's a machlekes about it. That is that. Rabbi Akiva, and we pass him like Rabbi Akiva.
How are you feeling?
Rabbi Akiva, oike shtei shurais. No. Go to the next picture. Hello. Kevin, wake up. The one on top, the top right. Oike shtei shurais and it shtei shurais. Umaniya comes but Solomon welcome shtei shurais and again oike shtei shurais and shtei shurais. So what he accomplished over here is first of all you need to do is you have to have a gap of only 8. Not this one. If you can go to the picture top right, only 8 amas in between the gourds and the gourds. As long as you have that, the onions in the middle, very good. The onions in the middle are not being chavush. And now the furrow in the bottom is Mishnah Gimel. Right. It's fine. And with Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't have to be mafulash. Beautiful. Now the Chachamim, the third opinion in the Mishnah, is a mixture between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. The Chachamim in our Mishnah agree with Rabbi Akiva that you don't have to have mafulash. You don't have to have a separation all the way through the field. And for that suffices a furrow of halacha gimel, and the way we are learning is 6 by 6. I don't know why in the picture that he made it doesn't look like a 6 by 6. It's not a bar. Doesn't matter. However, the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yishmael, and lekula alma for sure. If the middle one is onions, if the middle one is a non-muksha, which is that between the gourds and the gourds, what do you need to have? Not 8 amas, 12 amas. Let's read it inside. The Chachamim oimrim im ein bein shura lechaverto. The shura is not of onions, not psalim, shura of deluyan, of gourds, of the muksha. If you don't have at least shteim 12 amas, then lo yikayim zera shel bentayim. The zera in our Mishnah of onions, according to Chizkiah, where we learned yesterday, even of Tula Mitzri, you cannot put it in middle because of the din of Chach. So these are the 3 opinions in the Mishnah. We can stop over here. And God willing, next year we'll begin with the Gemara on Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis.